So in the IES practice guide on RTI, the third recommendation is for teachers to provide intensive, systematic instruction on up to 3 foundational reading skills. This should occur in small groups of students who score below the benchmark on universal screening. The guide also recommends that these homogeneous groups consist of 3 to 4 students and use curricula that address key components of the target skills. So instruction should be systematic and build over time. It suggests 3 particular practices to carry out this recommendation. First, use a curriculum that addresses the components of reading instruction, and this gets at some of the thoughts and recommendations that you posted, that some of you posted in the chat earlier. This includes phonemic awareness, phonics, vocabulary, comprehension, and fluency, and should also relate to students' needs and developmental levels. Second, implement this program for 3 to 5 times a week for approximately 20 to 40 minutes. And finally, build skills gradually and provide a high level of teacher-student interaction with opportunities for practice and feedback. The Capel SRBI for English Learners publication provides guidance on monitoring progress when implementing tiered instruction. First, of course, use the data sources we've reviewed over the past 2 sessions. As we've discussed, however, use caution to ensure that multiple data sources are reviewed that represent a range of oral and written language and literacy skills. The Capel publication suggests that when considering Tier 2 interventions for potentially dually identified English learners, teachers should separate students into small groups of, again, ideally 3 to 5 students, and make sure the content and activities are decisively different than those which were involved in Tier 1 instruction. So interventions should be conducted 5 days a week, again, 8 to 10 weeks, in 20 to 40, maybe 30-minute mini lessons. As interventions are implemented, educators should use data to determine whether students are making adequate progress, and if by the end of the intervention they have made appropriate progress, of course, then they should be removed from the intervention and returned to Tier 1 instruction. If there is only some progress, students should be regrouped, and the Tier 2 intervention should be rerun. If there is very little progress, educators should consult with colleagues and consider moving to more intensive intervention activities in Tier 3. So the Capel publication on SRBI suggests that when implementing Tier 2 interventions with students who are English learners, teachers should take into account a few considerations in terms of what interventions would look like for all students versus for those who are English learners. So for example, English learners in Tier 2 instruction may vary in time and intensity from Tier 1. Content may not be matched well to English learners' backgrounds, including their academic, socio-emotional, and or behavioral needs, which is what sort of refers back to some of the discussions we had about Adnan. So teachers should make adaptations to account for these mismatches, such as using systematic and explicit instruction, including modeling, numerous examples, and varied opportunities for sharing feedback. We should focus on academic language and vocabulary instruction with numerous opportunities for practice. And we should provide frequent and structured opportunities for students to further develop their oral language skills. So additional considerations when implementing Tier 2 interventions have to do with grouping and student-to-teacher ratios, which may be more varied when working with English learner students. For example, non-English learners would be grouped homogeneously, so students with similar needs, with a teacher-to-student ratio of up to 1 to 4 or 1 to 6. But when working with English learners, it may be difficult to group homogeneously if there are no true peers available, for example. Teacher-to-student ratios might be much smaller or larger if there are few students or limited staff available with expertise in schools or in districts. In addition, when implemented for all students, Tier 2 interventions would be based on the Common Core state standards, but when working with English learners, interventions would also need to account for the linguistic demands that are embedded in standards and other curricula and instruction. So teachers, therefore, should consider the following when implementing Tier 2 with English learners. Address specific reading and math skills as determined, again, by available data. Incorporate reading, writing, listening, and speaking in authentic contexts. Involve reinforcement, repetition, practice, and redundancy of vocabulary skills and strategies taught in core reading and math lessons. To inform consideration of what Tier 2 supports might look like in the classroom, we've drawn from the IES Practice Guide, Teaching Academic Content and Literacy to English Learners in Elementary and Middle School. The authors recommend that English learners benefit from word learning strategies to help them figure out the meaning of words. Ways to do this might include context clues, teaching about word parts, or referencing cognates. In addition to providing direct instruction on academic vocabulary words, teach students to independently figure out the meaning of unknown words by using context clues, word parts, again, morphology, and cognates.